Greetings, diners and other viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Core News Report of the Collapse Cafe of the Doomstead Diner. And I'm back here today again with several of my good friends, other collapseniks, bloggers, scientists, and assorted professionals of various types who are with me. You'll see on the screen four of them. You'll see my partner in crime, who runs the Doomstead Diner with me, Surly. He's the one wearing the ball cap. And then next to him is another diner admin, goes by the handle Monsta666 on the diner, and he's from the UK. And then down below on my screen, I'm not sure it'll be the same once the Skype recorder renders, but you know, on my screen, he's on the bottom, is George Mobus. And George is from Tacoma area in Washington State. He's a professor emeritus from the University of Washington. And then next to him is Hugo Bardi, who is across the pond, also in Italy, in Firenze, Florence, Italy, where he is not yet retired as a professor. Okay, he's going to work till he drops. Okay, he's a professor of physical chemistry down there, and then disembodied here because the camera's not working or whatever is another diner admin and runs his own blog, Chasing the Squirrel, and that is K-Dog, who is with us as well. And he's another forcibly retired person, a computer engineer, an IT engineer. And so those are our representatives today. And what we're going to do is catch up. All right, I talked with most of these people on one occasion or another a couple of months ago when the coronavirus COVID-19 issue was really just getting rolling, and they were starting to roll out the lockdowns and so forth, and the death count was a lot lower than it is today. And so we're gonna hash out what's gone down in the interim. All right. So let's get right into it.
What are your thoughts? What are your questions? What intrigues you these days about the problems going down?
Well, my primary area of focus is the political dimension, and I recently read something that I wanted to bring to your attention. It was published by Jay Rosen, who is an American professor who is an observer of journalism, writing for PressThink.org, who describes the Trump administration's current iteration of its plan is the plan is to have no plan. Basically, that they're flying by the seat of the pants because this is essentially the best they can do. And rather than be held to account, Rosen posits that their idea is to let the daily deaths mount up, try to affix the blame to China or some other foreign actor, offload all of the decisions to the state governors who have taken the ball and run with it and have discharged their responsibilities. But if there are any bad outcomes, well, they're certainly not the fault of the White House because the governors are in charge, right?
Right.
And then when the press shows up to try to hold them to account, pick a fight with them, as we've seen this president do time and again, and to otherwise sow confusion wherever. Steve Bannon, that one-time strategist in the White House, whose thinking still permeates, described the press as the enemy and said the way you deal with the press is to flood the zone with shit, which is essentially Bannon's phrase for overwhelming the system with disinformation, distraction, and denial. And what that does is boosts what some folks call the search costs for reliable intelligence. We've had a recent discussion on the Diner Forum about the origins of this virus. Some people assert that it was a natural mutation that entered humanity via jumping a species. Others say it was manufactured in the lab and I was either released or went out in the trash and entered humanity that way. No matter how diligently you may search for that information, you're not going to find it because there's so many different spins on this. It's a hall of mirrors. It's reminiscent of Plato's cave, where we don't have any visuals. What we have are shadows on the wall, basically, and we're trying to interpret those. So that's what's on my mind these days is the cynical depravity of the Trump White House and its eagerness to sow disinformation, all in the purpose of getting Trump reelected, which is the only purpose for this year, as far as the Trump folks are concerned. Just my opinion.
And that political spin. I mean, that's what's going on here in the fascist states of America. What I'd like to posit or present is to Hugo and to Monsta. They're in two other countries, in the UK and in Italy. So I'll go to Monsta first on this one. Monsta, what's going on with the politics in jolly old England there? Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, or Prime Idiot, whatever, he came down with COVID himself. He was on a respirator and so forth. How is that all affecting the political situation with COVID in Britain?
I mean, I think the big issue in the UK, and there's a growing acknowledgement by the media and a lot of experts, is that the way the government handled the crisis was suboptimal, if you use a diplomatic phrase. But I think there's a general feeling that they were totally unprepared. They were caught with their pants down. And there's been reports in the past where people have warned that the UK was underprepared for a pandemic. The experts said the most likely source of a pandemic would be influenza type virus. And they even mentioned, specific things of dangers like care homes, lack of PPE equipment, and testing infrastructure wasn't there. So all the things that we've done wrong were highlighted in this document, but weren't acted upon. But really at this time, it's like damage control, like Boris and people in his party are like saying, now is not the time to argue over these details. We need to focus on the present, and that's to deal with this crisis. So this is the issue. The death toll is going up every day, and it's turning into a political situation in the sense that it's just not looking very good for the government. And one of the things that they've recently done is they used to do comparisons with other countries. They've removed that recently, and people are saying, why are you doing that? And they said, oh, it's not relevant. So it's not like, there is a suppression of facts and things, but I don't think it's like political in the sense that, like in America, where he's thinking, I need to protect this constituent because they are conservatives, and I'll throw everyone who votes Labour under the bus. I think Boris genuinely is trying to help, but the problem with Boris is he's just not. It's a capability problem. I don't think he's capable of doing it. He's a showman. He likes to just say stuff, but he's not the type of person who's detail orientated. Like I think you need someone who's like more knowledgeable and like preferably a scientist, because because if you look at Germany, for example, Merkel is a physicist, and she could appreciate stuff like exponential growth, the science behind, doing the testing and all of that. And that's simply what Boris wasn't thinking about. When the coronavirus hit, he was thinking about Brexit. Remember Brexit? Yeah, he was thinking about that.
With that. It's still going on.
It's still on course. The Brexit is still on. The timelines haven't changed, but he was focused on that, and that's the issue. Yeah.
Who's running a vacuum cleaner?
What? Well, we lost Surly's camera.
Hello.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, he's in the corner.
Well, you're here in the call, but right now your camera is not appearing on screen. I think it maybe only puts up 4 at once, and then who's ever talking gets on screen or something. I don't know. But just keep. So let me move down now over to Hugo, who's in Italy. And what's the situation there? How's the Prime Minister handling it? Localities, local governments, is there much turmoil? I would imagine there would be, but can you fill us in on that one?
Well, let's say that the situation is moving in a good direction. In general, the epidemic is slowing down. We followed the curve, and now we're going down. It should be over completely for this phase in a couple of weeks. So in Italy, it is past right now. Then we don't know what will happen in the future, but there are many lessons to be learned here. We ended up with a death rate which is real small. We're talking about 0.5 in 1,000, very, very modest. But it was a big crisis. In some places of the country, we have a high death rate, and we have no idea why. In some places, we had such a disaster. In other places, zero, like where I am in Tuscany, who has essentially zero epidemic. We didn't see it. And so, but that's a long story that I'm not expert about. Maybe I could give you some idea what's going on here by noting the big problem we had in Italy was the interface of politics and science, a tremendously big, enormous, gigantic problem. And like Mosta said, in Germany they did so much better because Miss Merkel used to be a scientist, and she understands scientists, and she can speak the scientist language. Now the point is that if you speak 2 different languages, you don't understand each other. And imagine you suddenly find yourself in Italy, maybe running an Italian restaurant, and everybody speaks to you in Italian. You understand nothing. And what the hell? What is the thing you keep calling spaghetti? And I don't know what the hell it is. Maybe it's pizza? What is this? This is now the spaghetti is long and then the pizza is round, and it's complete mayhem. You don't understand each other. Our politicians completely misunderstood everything. The media misunderstood everything, and the scientists were not able to let themselves be understood. In practice, in Italy, the science said nothing, zero, which was completely ignored. In Britain, as you know, Monster, you had this problem with Mr. Ferguson, who was thrown under the bus, as you say, probably because he was disliked in the government. But,
there's a huge chasm between science and politics in almost every country, and then it's exacerbated, if you will, by the fact that you've got so many agencies and businesses with agendas, and they hire scientists to pitch their agenda. So you get competing scientific viewpoints because you get one scientist who says, "Oh yeah, we could open up because,"
Yeah. That's the more or less
and
that's
then
the way. It is the way it works. A politician is not looking for advice from scientists. The politician is looking for scientists who say exactly the thing that the scientists want to hear. It works like that. And you probably, folks, you know this as well as I do. But in Italy it was especially bad. Our
Right.
commission, we had a committee of scientists who were supposed to advise the government. It was a disaster, complete disaster. It was chosen basically at random. And many people had no experience in this field, and the real experts were left outside. But essentially, that didn't matter so much. What scares me about this story, you see, we have a certain capability to predict an epidemic. We have models. The models are very similar to the peak oil models, and even in a certain way similar to climate models. Not so complicated. These stories that you put in a lot of parameters and then become easy to make to make the problem the model too complicated and you lose control. But in general, it was impossible to bring the models to the public and the politicians. You know, there is a story that goes, you know, Erwin Schlesinger, the former Secretary of State of the United States, he said something very correct and very true, which was people have only two modes of operation, complacency and panic. And we saw it very well in Italy. It was perfect, either complacency or panic. There's no middle way, no one trying to understand what can be done to balance things, to say we have, of course, we need to fight the epidemics, but we also have an economy to keep alive. But that was not possible because politicians speak a different language. The language of politics is narrative. Like you said, Jason, you said that the evil Trump administration, let's say this, they search an enemy. And now they found an enemy in China. China is the enemy, and that's the way you carry on in politics. You find a narrative that defines the good guy, the bad guy, the nice girl, the smart boy. I mean, there are characters in narrative. There is Batman, the Joker, Robin, and all these kind of or things in narrative, but you don't interact with science. That's not, Trump is unable to interact with science, just like our government. That's the same thing. Trump is a little bit more evil, if you allow me, but I would grant to our politicians a certain degree of goodwill.
You go.
But
I'm gonna
yes,
I'm gonna break in here because on the science issue. By the way, you did some great Italian hand talking in that segment. They say the best way to shut an Italian up is to tie his hands together, something like that. But I want to talk to the other scientist
okay.
on the board to get his opinion on how science and politics are integrating or mishmashing, or what's going on.
That's one point I want to add. That then I'm over. I am very scared if something similar happens for climate. We try to integrate climate science into politics. It will be a total and absolute disaster if it is done in the same way. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise known as a clusterfuck. George, what about you? What do you think about how science and politics are integrating? And at any stage in this mess, do you think that they'll find a reasonable way to make the two work together, or are we just destined for disaster?
The latter, I think. There's so few politicians that have any kind of science background. And the point Hugo made about, I think it was Hugo, about the difference in the languages they speak. They can use the same words, but they have completely different semantics going on in their brains. No, I rather think that one of the best things that can come out of this is to see how many Darwin Awards we're going to be giving out. The people who are going out and clustering and want their freedom, like it's, and they're getting together. I just can't wait to see. I mean, these are Trump supporters for the most part. I think when the dust settles, and it'll probably be a long time from now, but when the dust settles, we're going to figure out that we need a completely different way of governing ourselves. And it won't look anything like the governments that we have right now, which are fundamentally hierarchical, top-down command and control. They have no relationship really to the way natural governance systems work. And so, I don't see politics as we practice it, have been practicing it, and science going hand in hand. There's no way, in my opinion.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there is. What happened to my screen? You guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can see you also.
I have lost everybody's picture on my screen. You can't see anybody now.
Well, I've got a screen that says you're still recording the call. And
all you guys are getting pictures?
Yes.
Now it's doing something else. Well, I'm going to keep talking for a little bit, or let you guys keep talking, but I think if I don't get an improvement here in the 2 or 3 minutes, then I am going to shut down and start to pick it up, start to call again.
Well, one thing I would say, and I just wonder, you talk about scientists not understanding. What would you say, about the new, the candidate Biden, Joe Biden, if he became president in next year, and I still think Corona will be there in the background somewhat, especially because we're going into winter season between now and then. Do you think he would be able to bring a more coherent response to what's going on, or do you think it's the same deal?
Yeah, it might be more coherent. Well, almost certainly would be more coherent, but that doesn't mean the parts that you're cohering together are necessarily correct. For example, he is a big, now I'm going to badmouth the banking industry here. He is a big supporter of Wall Street. And one of the things that Bernie Sanders is trying to do is get him to realize that, that's really part of the problem. But even Bernie Sanders doesn't know why. So Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, most of these people don't have a clue as to how the oil industry works. They just know that money flows somehow, but they don't know what's going on in the industry. They have no idea what the dynamics of fracking, for example. They're totally clueless about that stuff. And who do they go to find out, or to listen to? They go to the oil executives. They go to the banking executives. And I wouldn't want them going to economists anyway, because classical economists are also kind of full of shit. It's not that the scientists don't understand. I think scientists understand, and of course that's a broad brush. There are a lot of different kinds of scientists, but basically they understand. It's the politicians who don't, and yet the politicians have the levers of in their hands. Got the power.
Who has the power here? And then, again, money is power. And then there's money behind the politicians and people who are pulling their strings. All right. So when you look at the politicians, you're only looking at a surface lay. I call it window dressing. And there are all different flavors of window dressing, different color curtains and so forth. But if you pull the curtain back, you see the Wizard of Oz. And what you see is a little old man who is fucking things up, big time. Keith, why don't you give us some input here on that, on the integration between science and politics, and you've written and talked quite a bit on a diner about what's going on in that respect. You want to give us some thoughts on that? Keith, I'm not getting any audio from you. Are you guys getting audio from Keith?
No.
No.
All right, Keith, nobody hears your audio now. So, no question for you right now, unless you can fix that. Shirley, why don't you pick that up?
Well, the point that I wanted to make when George was talking, or after George was done talking, was that there's a widespread phenomenon which some people are calling the death of expertise. I think a man named Tom Nichols has written a book on this. And the executive summary of that would be, in essence, my closely held opinion based on watching a couple of YouTube videos is as good as your years of training and practice and direct experimentation. I mean, there's just I think part of the problem is that we no longer, or there's a significant part of the American public that no longer has a great deal of respect for scientific knowledge. When I was a kid, we would watch movies. They would be produced by Bell Labs, and this bald, white-haired man would come out. He was Dr. Research, and everything he said was bathed in the golden halo of scientific knowledge, and we were thus encouraged to believe in science as a font of truth. That doesn't mean that scientists don't make errors, but we seem to, we see this with anti-vaxxers, and vaccines cause autism and other sorts of pernicious mischief, all of which has been, I think, pretty conclusively proven to be false, but it won't die. It won't die because people will hold on to their beliefs rather than acknowledge that they might be wrong. And I don't know what we do about that.
No, if a given paradigm or explanation fits somebody's worldview, then it doesn't matter what evidence you produce, what facts you produce, and so forth. Those things are waved away, and whatever the idea is that best matches somebody's personal ideology and worldview is what they'll hold on to. And basically they'll hold on to it forever. I mean, I've been through this so many times on the diner and on the other websites that I have participated as a commenter. And, it doesn't matter what you say, what evidence you present, what citations, I give them the links and so forth to read and so forth. They don't read it.
People believe what they want to.
They don't want to read it. And all they really base everything on are 240 character twits from the twit in chief, Donald E. Tree Trumpovetsky. Okay, that's how they put things together, and that's all filtered through his brain, which is like you're talking about garbage in, garbage out. You got garbage in, and worse garbage comes out. All right, from one end to the other. Keith, your mic is working.
Yeah, I think I unplugged things and plugged things back in enough. So actually, I think both video and audio are working. So you should be able. Yeah. Yeah, so I can finally chime in. Yeah, pretty much I'm hearing, echoes of where I'm coming from on this. on my blog, this thing turned into, I got like one article I just turned into a daily update, and it's been just going on and on. And I'll be getting back to a more normal presentation, but it happened that way because I realized I was actually putting out information ahead of the mass media, which, pat myself on the back, it's not hard to do. So, for whether anybody was watching me or not, or, well, actually, I think a few people were, I think I was helping enlighten, get a positive message out there, some information. And, now we've moved on to the point where, it's here. It's been on for a while, and if you don't know about it, you really are an idiot. And so, how much education is there left to do? And from that point of view, as far as like, there were some fundamental things that were important to get out there, but I think they've gotten out there. And so now we're at a point where people are just believing what they want to believe. Personally, I read a book. I bring this up from time to time. I read Daniel Defoe's The Plague Years about 5 years ago. And at the time I read it, these people in 65, what do they know, and here I'm reading about how they're acting like idiots. And oh my gosh, it's happening exactly the same way now, the same stupidity. Nobody's gotten any smarter. The smart people are still smart. The dumb idiots are still dumb idiots. It's the same. Now I'm starting to rant because I get exasperated just as much as any one of you guys about
It's very to ranting.
I think there's an important thing because you can get, there's such a thing as a dumb, like well how am I going to say this? You can get educated idiot. Yeah, you could get educated idiots, and that's a problem. Like they know their stuff, they're well educated, but they come to conclusions that are baffling, to say the least. And I think that's another issue as well. That goes to your point, Keith.
Yeah, people are narrow. We get specialized. So that's the way our culture is. We get specialized, and we are encouraged to be narrow and focused on a particular thing. And how do you be well-rounded in a culture like this? It's hard to do.
We seem to have lost Hugo.
Yeah, Hugo, are you still here? Maybe on audio? No, apparently not.
Ouch.
I can try to get him back.
I think Mount Olympus is messing with us today.
Yeah, well, a call going to 6, locations is dependent on a lot of routers, and for everybody's to hold up for the whole time is it's a crapshoot. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
And overall, we're doing pretty good. I lost my screen for a while, but it came back on. And I will, once I get you guys rolling on talking again, I will see if I can get Hugo back. But that dichotomy between intelligence and common fucking sense is quite.
I want to add one more thing about that. I brought it up. I brought the intelligence stupidity thing up. But there's actually something else involved that's even bigger. And that is, who cares about other people? If you care about yourself, you don't care about what's happening, and you just want to get back to work, and you're going and you're standing on a state capitol step with a gun that's bigger than you are, wearing a mask, by the way. But if you care about other people, then hey, what can we do? How do we follow the rules? And so we're seeing a separation between people who care about other people and people who don't. And, and we're seeing what our culture values. In a sense, a lot of people are being exposed as to what they really are.
Yeah, it's true. Hey.
Hey, you're back.
But one thing I would say, and goes to your point, Keith, is like, take myself, for example. I'm 33 years old, so I'm relatively young. And with me,
Parts here you are.
You are.
yeah, but I'm just saying, when I look at the statistics, and unfortunately the statistics are getting quite advanced in the UK because of the deaths, I look at the thing, and it says like anyone under the age of 40 is got like less than a 1% chance of dying from it. And this is with all the under testing and stuff. So I'm like, I myself before the pandemic, I was going to be on holiday. I was going to be abroad somewhere, and I'm now just stuck in my home for like 2 months, and my life's on hold. And I'm like, I just want to move on with my life. If I go in the train and catch coronavirus, I might have even caught coronavirus as well. I could just move on with my life and do what I want to do. And this is where I think if this thing drags out longer, this is going to be an issue. Like the young generation might think, I want to see, my girlfriend. I want to, explore the world. I don't want to just be tied down to my house. What's the point in living if you can only stay in your house? And I think that can be a conflict.
Yeah, how
Poor
long?
people aren't even worrying about that. I mean, it's somewhat of a luck. It's all of us here are in this category, and we're affluent enough to be able to stay home. But what about people who, the paycheck to paycheck, they see it in a different way. So I just want to throw that in there. Sorry.
The economics is a huge driver here, and for a lot, probably more than half of the population, I mean, they can't survive, months and months with no income. Even with government stimulus checks that never come. Okay, I still have not got my stimulus. Okay, even though I am on the direct deposit list for my Social Security and for my taxes and all the rest. I file every year, but I still didn't get any fucking stimulus. Okay.
Speaking of stimulus, does people? What's the situation in Italy in terms of stimulus? Is the Italian government helping anyone in that sense?
I have no idea what's happening. It's such a confusion, honestly. We have no idea. The government speak of plans. We will do this. We will do that. And it changes every day. It is total disaster, for what I can say, in Italy. Almost as bad as in the United States.
Because I know economically, in terms of the UK, they've extended this furlong expenditure. So just to sort of, if anyone's not familiar, basically the furlong here is if you are working for a company and they can, instead of, if the company doesn't lay you off, the government will pay up to 80% of the salary. And basically now the government have agreed to do that up till October. So as long as they don't get rid of you, you will be on 80% salary up till October. That's how the government here is trying to support people, so there isn't like economic chaos at the end of this coronavirus.
And where, pray tell, does all this money come from? Okay, it's all funny money. It's based on nothing. It's all irredeemable debt that is being issued out by banks, and then interest is dropped on it, and so forth, and then it balloons. I mean, we're up well into the trillions now. We're going to get to the fucking quadrillions, the way things are going. So I'm like, how long does money have meaning when you can do that? So all of a sudden, the government is able to pay for everything. Okay. Pay everybody's wages, pay everybody's food stamps, pay everybody's rent, mortgages here in many states. I know in New York have been put on hold. You can't be evicted till I think end of August, maybe. Even commercial establishments, their rents and mortgages all on hold. How long can that go on? All right. There's no real economy here. It's completely fake. Of course, the people at the top, the banksters, and the people who are controlling the money spigot, they're taking home huge paychecks because they get bonuses for all this shit. All right. So the more trillions that are pumped through the system, the more hundreds of millions and billions that each of these guys make. All
Okay,
right?
Ari, I got something for you.
I'm making these days, but it's got to be big time money. All right.
Yeah, I got something for you. Okay.
okay.
Okay, listen to this. I'm reading, I got this in my email today. From May 13th to May 20th, please do not call the toll-free numbers with questions about your claim. These will allow our specialists to focus on outbound calling to resolve issues for those who've been waiting the longest. For 1 week, we're limiting inbound calls to customers who cannot apply for unemployment or file a weekly claim online or need a translator for help with their claim. Have general questions about unemployment via our question hotline at 833-572-8400. Need to report fraud by our special fraud hotline at 800-246-9763. Hey, isn't that nice to know the fraudsters are getting a week off here? They don't have to worry about getting caught this week. All those people sitting at home not working, collecting all that money for doing nothing when they should be out there banging on doors demanding to be employed. It's really something. So, I'm in good shape, but obviously they've been totally overloaded. The system can't handle the massive unemployment, and that's the next thing that's going to grip America is because whether the state governors say get back to work or not, there's no jobs to go back to. What you're going to do?
So this kind of gets to the point that I was just thinking about a few moments ago, and I was just wondering, like we've kind of gone through the lockdown phase, and we're now moving towards the opening up of the economy sort of stage. Getting people back into their jobs and whatnot. How do you think this reopening of the economy, so to speak, is going to work? Like, George, what do you think are the implications of the economy opening up, and how do you think that's going to affect the dynamics of the disease? Will that cause a spread? One of the things I'm noticing is like maybe the weather has changed since March, February when it was colder. Do you think these things will, how do you think these, because the way I'm seeing things is there's various systems. We got the economic system, we got the pandemic or the infectious system, and then we've got the hospitals and their capacity to work these things. How do you think these dynamics are going to play out?
Well, I don't make predictions. So,
oh, come on. Everybody expects pundits to make predictions.
I think
you got to make predictions, George.
Oh, I'll make a long-term prediction.
Oh.
Homo sapiens is going extinct. Eventually.
Oh, wow.
Eventually.
Wow.
Now,
okay.
Let me just point out what I observed going on prior to the pandemic was that
I can make predictions.
There you go. I need one of those.
Oh.
What was going on before the pandemic? The so-called economy, and I'm talking about a global economic system, was so badly broken. I mean, Ari just mentioned one of the phenomena that's going on, the fakeness of money. It's that could not go on forever. There's nothing behind it. We saw the entire economic system, which ultimately is based on the flow of energy. And when you start reducing the flow of energy, and actually we've been in a case of lower energy per capita, that is free energy to do work. We've been in that situation since at least the late 70s, if not sort of around the mid 70s. So we were scared of peak oil, but peak oil isn't really or oil flow per se is not what counts. It's the amount of working energy that you get out of whatever fuel it is per individual. And so we have two things going on. There's this wide discrepancy between the rich and the poor that's growing. The rich are getting richer and so on and so forth. So all those things taken together, it was already coming apart. This, if anything happens, it's going to be the pandemic simply sort of pulled the trigger to cause we were at a critical stage, and boom, now we go down. Like I say, I'm just sitting back and watching. If people want to try to open up their economies to get things back on the consumerist trail again, right? I say let them. And I get back to the Darwin Awards. We're going to see an awful lot of stuff go down. We may even ourselves be victims of some of the turmoil. But in a nutshell, that's what I'm predicting.
Come back over at us over the mountain passes. You know, it's Montana. They're having a spike, and they're only one item away.
Yeah. So. We're doing good here in Alaska, though. We only have 360 cases statewide in my area, which is bigger than Italy, of the Matanuska Susitna River Valley. There are all of 12 cases and no dead people. Okay, so if you want to move anywhere, move to the last great frontier.
Well, I think there's one big advantage that America has. One big advantage that America has in terms of this pandemic is the population density in America on the whole, especially Alaska, is really low. And people drive cars, whereas London is a complete opposite. High population density, loads of public transport.
Yeah, but that's exactly the problem. When this thing first broke out, you know, I was watching the Johns Hopkins COVID map, and I watched it follow the freeways. And then from the counties along the freeways, it's now spread out so it's an even distribution. But, you know, the car thing works both ways. We got an interstate highway system that, you know, idiots in one state can bring it right in. And,
it's spread from truck stop to truck stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, you have to do what you can do. So you don't stop doing what you think's right for your community. But in a sense, what's the point when you don't have a national coordination that's going to defend the efforts of your community to protect themselves? You know, I mean, so some areas can spend all sorts of time and money protecting their population, and then have basically do not care and don't want government in their life to just stream in everything. So that's.
But yeah, I think I can highlight it. One of the things, because I heard a report in London specifically, and London I think is like New York, yeah. Because one of the things I heard is like basically the government in the UK, they didn't have anything, they didn't take any action. It's ironic as well because Boris Johnson is a Brexit government. There was open borders. 18 million people came into London between January and the lockdown. 18 million, and they said, "Oh, it's open borders. Anyone can come in." 18 million people from outside the UK just come into London. And imagine how many of those people had coronavirus.
Yeah, and they all pretty much got to come across the channel on those ferries, you know, or through the tunnel on the trains that run through the tunnel. So
no, I'm not counting. I'm not even counting the channel tunnel.
Would you excuse me one moment? I'm sorry, but I had to leave. And I'm sorry that also my computer crashed, so I lost half of the discussion. But anyway, it was a pleasure. And see you all another time, and hopefully everything will go well. As I said, the epidemic is going down, and we all survived so far. After
Yeah.
George says we're going all to die, to go extinct, but with calm, not in a hurry. Okay.
Well,
So bye bye,
you know,
everybody.
Thank
See
you.
you. Take care.
All right.
Take
Bye.
care of yourself.
Chinese,
Hugo,
Chinese greeting. Do this. It's
there'll be a vaccine, okay? Because that's about the only thing that's going to really do stuff. So
Maybe.
Hugo, take care of yourself in Italy, and I still haven't got my dental work done, so I'm still
I remember that. Maybe
I
still do that. Bye,
I'm still
everybody.
missing half my mouth and teeth, whatever. All right, take care of yourself. All right. Now maybe Surly's picture will come back on. Surly, you've been on here, but we haven't seen you in a while. Yep, there you are. You were pushed off the screen by Hugo, and now you're back.
Sorry, he was. Oh, happy to give up my seat for a better quality of talent.
There you go. Well, Hugo, he's a specialist in his own regard,
Yep.
we got, you're a politically aware person and whatnot, heavily into politics. Surely, if most of you who are not regular diners know, was deeply involved in the Occupy Norfolk movement. His daughter actually got arrested in that business when that was going down. That was right when the diner got started. And if you go back to the early archives of the diner, then you can read the stories about Occupy and so forth. We covered that extensively on the Doomstead Diner. And the history of the diner is long and deep, and you wouldn't believe the amount of verbiage that is in our forum, our discussion forum. It's astounding. My database is, it's bigger than God. It's a huge database, and a lot of really bright people expressing opinions over the years. And I've learned a lot running the Doomstead Diner. I'm really happy that I started it, and I'm happy where it's progressed to over the years. It hasn't always been easy, folks. I will tell you that. But it's been worth it. And I'm extremely glad to have had Surly as my partner through these years. And we're getting near a decade. Surly and I have been together for more than a decade. We started together on another website, the Burning Platform, a few years before the diner. But it didn't. Okay, well, Hugo's gone. And I think we've got a pretty long broadcast here. I'm not sure how long, but it's pretty fucking long. So I want to tie it up with final thoughts from the people who are still here. So once again, I'll do a little round robin for you to express any final thoughts you have, where we're going, what you would like to see happen, how many dead people do you think we're going to get before we turn a corner on this? What are the numbers going to go up to? I surely put up a graph recently of the Spanish flu of 1918. In that one, we had an early peak the first year, and then the next year, big peak. Okay, so in the picture or the graphic said, pointed to the bottom of the first little peak, and it said, "You are here." Are we going to get a bigger peak, in the fall, winter of 2020, 2021? Is that going to come? And any other prognostications or thoughts that you might have about the future? I know a lot of you don't want to make predictions, okay? but
Well, then you can be held accountable for them.
That's right. I always I put my predictions 10 years out because I figure I am dead man 10 years out. Okay, if I make 10 more years, that would be astounding. It's astounding that I've lived as long as I have. But anyway, I can't go back down to Seattle because I went through the operations right now that I need. Hilarious. Okay, so all right, I'm going to start with Keith on this. What are your thoughts? How are we doing? Where are we going?
Well, okay, you wanted predictions, so I'm going to predict, yes, we're going to have a huge second wave. Don't know quite when it'll be, and here's why I'm going to say that. Everybody's a petri dish who gets this. This thing is a particular kind of virus that mutates. One thing I read was that virtually every cell it infects, makes thousands of copies. It might make like 10,000 copies when it bursts or kills the cell and is released out. So of those 10,000, 5 or 6 are going to have a mistake. So one thing that Ugo mentioned was, Italy has these weird areas where they have high death rate, low death rate, and a lot of strange things are turning up. It seems to be affecting some children, but not in the way of a respiratory thing, but it seems to be infecting their organs and just all sorts of weird things seem to be happening. And my suspicion is that this could have something to do with the fact that it's a very malleable virus. So what this means is that the more half-ass we are about this, the more dangerous it is. That, if the idea needs to be to wipe it off the face of the earth, to make it so rare that if somebody gets it, like a team of doctors descend from helicopters and find everybody who got exposed, Ebola style or something. But, that's not going to happen. So what's going to happen? We're going to go ahead with the same kind of stupidity and intelligence that we've shown so far, only it'll be intensified, and there'll be a lot more angry people. There'll be a lot more inaction. There'll be a lot more deaths. People are still trying to minimize what the death is, but this thing's exponential. So basically, since it's still going up, and it is slowly, the abatement procedures, from what I was reading yesterday, are basically it's a holding action. It's not really reducing it. And in states that have relaxed restrictions, they are spiking. So this means that it's just going to keep on coming, and it's going to get worse. And people are now we get into the area of, I don't want to predict beyond the fact that the probability of this mutating into a more serious problem is very high. So
Yeah, it does appear that way. Masa, you want to give me your thoughts?
In terms of what I think, it's going to be like a varied response. Some countries are going to handle it better than others. We've seen that already. Like you look at Taiwan, South Korea, and Germany, and New Zealand, they've handled it pretty well. Other places less well. America, UK, big ones. So I think more of the same. There's going to be a very disparate range of responses. So I think it's really hard to say, because one of the things that I'm wondering about is, does climate affect the R value? We're going into summer now. Traditionally, influenza viruses are not as infectious in these periods, so that could sort of calm things down. But then at the same time, that's a double-edged sword, because when we get to October, September, October, November time, you might get a second wave then. So that's a very big unknown. And I think, if we're not careful, there could be a second wave. Particularly, I'd say the highest risk factor, if I'm honest with you, is America, because, Trump is trying to do everything he can to revive the economy, and everyone wants to believe him. Well, the Republican states want to believe him anyway. So that's where I see the biggest risks. But I see significant risks in other places like the UK. So I think the big thing that rides on this is getting a vaccine. But when you get a vaccine, I don't know. It will come out in Europe and the United States, and they'll sort of get some sort of normalcy. And that's what I think will happen, but it's really like, this is just speculation on my part. So I think very unsure, but I think some places will deal with it better. And
Yeah.
so we can't think of it as a universal thing, like everywhere it will get better, everywhere it will get worse. Some places will deal with it pretty well, other places it will be a disaster, and it's just a question of where and when, sort of thing. Is that a prediction? I don't know, but that's what I feel.
No, that's a pretty good analysis, I think, overall. More or less match my own. But I'll save my opinions and prognostications for the very end. Let me move to George. George, you want to give us some final thoughts? I know you're big on the no predictions, but
Well, it's you build models so that you can figure out scenarios, right? You want to. You're not predicting something. You're essentially saying these are some possibilities. Here's and so we need to anticipate the various cases. Exactly what we did not do for this pandemic, and very likely almost nobody did. But in any case, I get back to this idea when I mentioned Darwin Awards and very long-term prediction. I'm really getting at the fact that humanity is going to go through a major phase shift. That much I'm sure of. It's done it before, and why shouldn't we do it again? Given the fact that the system that we have for society was already broken and breaking apart, I don't see any other way than to realize that a lot of people are going to get hurt for sure, but I think humanity can come out the other side with a very new set of attitudes and new ways of looking at themselves and the rest of the world. So I see this as not so much a disaster. It is a disaster, but I also see the potentiality of it.
yeah, it's life has a cycle, and this, I think, is part of a grand cycle. But again, I will go into my thoughts on that at the end. Shirley, you want to give us your final thoughts for today?
My final thought is relates to my original thought, which is the plan is to have no plan. Our plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, Monsta, is that we're adopting de facto the plan that the UK rejected, which is herd immunity. We're going to let this virus rip through our population like a hot knife through butter, because we're going to open up the economy in spite of every bit of guidance from the CDC and our medical people, because Trump needs to be reelected. And if Granny and Grandpa have to die, well, you know what? Opportunities have a cost now, don't they? And too bad, so sad. Thanks for the memories, Granny and Grandpa. Thanks for what you left us in the will. We're going to miss you. And that's basically, if that sounds cynical and depraved, sure, there you go. I think it's just that simple. Our plan is herd immunity, and to have no plan, and to deflect blame.
And I just calculated your while you were talking. I just did the numbers on herd immunity for America. Right. We'll only have 6.3 million dead to get to 70% immunity is 6.3 million at 3%.
Yeah, that's livable. We have a
lot of people. I'm sorry.
Who was there, who said something similar to that. Well, it's just Granny and Grandpa, and it's okay if they die. Okay, so one less bill for me to pay to keep them in the nursing home. Okay.
So some cynical people are calling COVID-19 the boomer remover. So So, you can take that. I mean, Gore Vidal once famously said, this is the United States of amnesia. We remember nothing. We learn nothing from history. And you mentioned that graph that we've seen from the Spanish flu. There was a huge second wave. And yeah, we are in the second inning of a 9-inning game, and all the runs are going to get scored in the middle innings. I mean, if history is telling us what happens for infections like this, because like the flu of 1918 and 19, there's no built-in immunity. We are all Native Americans with smallpox blankets in the face of a novel coronavirus.
That's basically what it
End of
boils.
the first inning and the bases are loaded.
Yeah.
For the other team, the little guy, the microscopic enemy. Okay, the unseen enemy, and I'll just conclude with one.
And we
final
talked
thought
about
here.
how this is running rampant mainly through the elderly population, and that at least a segment of the population kind of looks at the elderly, the disabled, like me, as disposable. All right. Okay, so we lose 7 billion old people, no big fucking deal. There are 350 million people in the United States, right? And so that's kind of an opinion out there. But we have another symptom that is growing and ongoing, and it became first apparent in New York, where I come from originally, and that is it's affecting children, infants even, and it's not, and it was mentioned earlier in our broadcast, but it doesn't have the same symptoms, but all of the cases, the victims tested positive for coronavirus, and it basically is an infection of the internal organs of various kinds, and they shot
Vascular component.
yeah.
Vascular. They can. Children are dying of heart attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And
Kidney failure and so forth.
they have to be watched in a hospital, or they can literally die from a heart attack. If they're under the age of 10 years old.
Yeah, and so that it's not a huge number yet, but we've already seen that the coronavirus is an exponential growth function. Okay, and so what started out as a few cases in China 6 months ago, something like that, probably November, December, sometime last year, and then but it blew up in Wuhan province, and then it migrated from there, and then it hit Europe and the United States, which proved to be very fertile breeding grounds for more of it, and so I think we can expect, or it's a reasonable assumption that we're going to see this problem hitting kids a lot more when the second wave comes, mutation and so forth that we've already mentioned. And I, for one, am very interested to see how the public reacts in general when it's not the old people and the cripples who are dying, but it's the kids. How will you react to that? Okay? Will we make some changes? I don't know. And as the future goes, it's much like what George said. Okay? We're going through a sea change for humanity. And I talk about it as a population knockdown. Okay? And I don't know. I can't tell you what the numbers are going to be. 10 years down the line, or 50 or 100 years down the line. But I can tell you that we're never, ever going to have 7.5 or 8 billion people walking the face of the earth at the same time again. It's just too many meat packages, Homo sapien meat packages, for this planet to handle. It's too much biomass. And so the population has to come down, and it will. How fast and how significantly, in your lifetime, my lifetime, I don't know. But it's not going to be pleasant, ever, for quite some time. And that's all to do. This time, until next time. Here, on the Collapse Cafe Coronavirus Report of the Doomsday Diner. Hasta la future, whatever it holds. That's a wrap.